women in Shakespeare because, no offense, but they're a lot more fascinating than I thought. And I mostly focused on how he was able to make them both masculine and feminine, and how there was a lot more to them just being strong women. And then I also talked about their different portrayals in the comedies and tragedies. It is a well-known fact that Shakespeare could tap into the minds of both men and women and make a play that represented something each gender would enjoy. However, he also had the ability to swap the characteristics of males and females and make them less like separate genders and more like one entity. His heroes were strong and full of courage, never backing down if it was time to battle. He was able to capture the raw masculine persona, even though he could also catch the female one as well. In doing this, Shakespeare created many paradoxes amongst his characters. We see these paradoxes in the play As You Like It, mainly in the character Rosalind. She's a sensational character that is able to be both immensely feminine and sensual, but also fit right in as a boy amongst a rope of macho men. We see her transformations all throughout the play. When she is feminine, her cousin Celia proclaims, "Is it possible on such a sudden you should fall so strong a liking with old Sir Rowland's youngest son?" This proclamation represents the idealistic way that women think, how women believe in love at first sight and think not with their minds but with their hearts. Rosalind, however, is able to change this way of thinking when she is Ganymede and comes to speak with Orlando like a saucy lackey, and under this fat habit play the knave with him. To her, Orlando's verses and proclamations of love are silly and are a tedious homily. She has switched from her idealistic way of thought to having a manlier, realistic way of thinking, whereas Orlando, who is the strong hero, shows his idealistic thought through his love poems. It is this switch that makes these characters paradoxical, because as a couple they represent the union of idealism and realism combined, but it is the male who is emotional and the female who is realistic. However, it is not that simple, as they often switch back to their rightful way of thinking throughout the play. Even though Orlando does do some gender changing, it is Rosalind that is the overall well-rounded character. She alone is able to be idealistic and real at the same time. She is able to represent alone what they represent as a couple. Rosalind's character represents the new Renaissance way of thinking that combined men and women, the union of Venus and Mars. This union represents Rosalind not in that she is joined with Orlando, but that she already has a part of his nature within her. We can see her masculine and feminine behavior throughout the play when she plays the part of Celia's protector, but also has the weak female part. When Celia and Rosalind decide to go to Arden, Rosalind proclaims, "Were it not better that I am more than common tall, that I did suit me more than all points like a man, a gallant curl axe upon my thigh, a boar spear in my hand, and my heart lie there what hidden women's fear their will have a swashing and a martial outside, as many other mannish cowards have, and do outface it with their semblances." It is here that Rosalind shows that she is ready to fight and protect Celia, act as a man should with his weapons. Later on, the opposite happens when Rosalind, then acting as Ganymede, faints at the napkin that has Orlando's blood on it. Rosalind is one of Shakespeare's ultimate not just women but human beings. Rosalind plays the part of woman and man equally. Shakespeare obviously had a love of the androgynous character, as most of his plays are full of them. In Shakespeare's comedy, a man's possible perfection is epitomized through marriage, the joining of two opposites to become one. Rosalind was able to represent man's possible perfection in that she was able to be both man and woman equally before she ever married Orlando. Herself to play just one role, and she would not be the spectacular phenomenon that Shakespeare made her to be. She would not be able to love or rule as marvelously and passionately as she did. Cleopatra is able to determine her own destiny, where her male counterparts are all determined by her. She is by herself what others can only wish to be or be through her. Of all Shakespeare's heroines, Cleopatra most fully embodies the paradoxical implication of transvestite performance. Even though she never appears on the stage in male disguise, she is Shakespeare's most compelling image of female erotic power. And then I talked about how Shakespeare didn't always make idealistic roles for his female characters. Shakespeare's plays tell us both too much and too little about his views of women. Female characters are idealized and demonized, and behavior that elicits praise and success in some contexts is condemned in others. Most important, every word in the play scripts was written as the utterance of a character, whose views do not necessarily coincide with those of their author. Shakespeare tantalizes and tortures us with his different portrayals of his female characters. They are never what they appear to be, and they seem to have specific roles of either good or evil, depending on whether the play is a comedy or tragedy. In his comedies, women are most often nurturing and powerful, as their values educate the men. Mutuality between the sexes may be achieved. Many critics discuss how their male disguises make possible their efficacy, freeing them from social restrictions while subduing the threat posed by their sexuality. In tragedy, the women do not have the benefit of disguise, therefore their roles are more varied, more constricted, and more precarious. While in comedy, the heroines achieve their ends gracefully by playing a part, in tragedy they are condemned for acting, accused of being deceitful when they are not, or relegated to the position of audience to male acting. Cleopatra and Desdemona are the victims of this categorizing. Cleopatra must continuously act and never reveal herself for fear of losing her kingdom. This leads to her losing everything and her own suicide. Desdemona is accused of being an adulteress, but she most certainly is not. This accusation leads to her own husband murdering her for revenge.
We're going to need to, I always do this before the final paragraph, but...
Okay, yes, I'm just making one quote in here. Good women are often powerless, and powerful women are always threatening, and in fact, destructive. Women in tragedies most invariably are destroyed or absent from the new order consolidated at the conclusion. So, yeah, in comedy, the heroine dominates, and in tragedy, she doesn't. And, yeah, I guess I'll just end there, because I have like 10 more pages.
Any questions?
Do you think that you see similar portrayals of women in like media today, where you're either really good or really bad, or
Well,
you know
yeah.
that kind of dichotomy?
I think it's always, yeah. Because if you're smart and beautiful and cunning, then there has to be something bad about you. You know, there has to be some ugly past, or you know, you slept with someone to get there. You know,
Right.
there has to be some way to like soil that image. So I mean, I guess it's still the same way.
Excellent. The only flaw I see is that you're too fascinating. We're running over time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.